This is really exciting. This is my first time headlining here, so this is really great. Your support and your support makes me really uncomfortable. But this is a big year for me. I moved out of my parents' house. Thank you. But my parents are. Just wait for it. It gets better. I've never had a setup get that kind of reaction. I moved out of my parents' house, but my parents are hoarders, so they don't know I've left yet. And cue the laughing. That's the spot. I haven't told them yet because I like being a burden. And as a kid, I remember I liked to. I always wanted to go camping, because I wanted to sleep outside where it was clean. And when I tell people that I grew up living with hoarders, is they usually will say the same thing. They're like, "Oh, living with hoarders, that must have been really unsafe. You must have been in like constant danger." And I was like, "It's really actually not that dangerous." Like a few years ago, we had a fire in the house, and then a couple weeks ago, we found it. It really didn't put that much of a dent in it, you guys. It was really sad. But it's actually a lot safer to live with hoarders, because if anybody were to break into the house, they would just get pissed off and go home. And if I heard them breaking in, I would sneak downstairs and help them carry shit out to their truck. Like, follow me, I know where the best stuff is. There's really only two practical reasons to hoard if you're going to be a hoarder. The first one is if you hate the person that you live with, just start collecting more and more stuff, and I promise you that eventually you won't see him anymore. I'm not saying that my parents hate living with each other, but I don't rule it out. The other reason is if you want to be the greatest hide-and-seek champion of all time. I was really good. People couldn't find me. If you bring something into a house with hoarders, they're not going to find it. If Voldemort had hid all of his Horcruxes in my parents' house, he would have lived forever. He didn't even have to separate them. He could have put them all in one bag and left them in one spot. Harry Potter would have shown up at the house and been like, "This is bullshit." How bad are evil wizards really? So now I live with my girlfriend. Hold your applause. It's been really good though. A lot of people will say, like, when you live with a significant other, usually you'll run into problems, you'll have a hard time like getting along with each other. You always want to be careful of that, but actually it's been really good. One thing that my girlfriend does do, that is, and it's not her fault, but she watches a lot of serial killer documentaries. And that's not usually a bad thing, but I am very paranoid about being murdered. I think someone, I'm always, like if I go outside to take out the trash and a white van pulls up, I'm like, this is it, this is how I go out. These people, they're here for me. It's ironic too, because a lot of casting directors see me and they're like, "Oh, you kind of give off like a serial killer vibe. You'd be perfect for that." I'm not an actor, they just tell me recreationally. But if you decide that you want to murder me, and at some point one of you might, a little pro tip on murdering me, Brian Jacobovitz, is wait until I order takeout. Because I'm going to answer the door. I'm not even going to look. So, food is definitely a weakness of mine. I always talk about going on diets. Recently, I said I had to go on a diet because I was picking up a friend of mine in my car, and he opened the car and saw like some loose like lettuce in the passenger seat, and he was like, "Oh, you're eating tacos?" I was like, "I could have been eating a salad, you don't know." So I decided that maybe I should go on a diet. And the thing about going on a diet for me is I always say that around the same time of the year. I usually say it like in the fall, like around the holidays. And I say that to people and they're like, "Well, that's the worst time to go on a diet because of all the holidays, because it's so hard to lose weight." And I said, you're absolutely right. So now I look at the calendar and I'm like, well, it's February and there's Valentine's Day, so February's out. And then March has St. Patrick's Day, so March is out. And then you have Easter and Passover, and then you have Mother's Day and Father's Day. And then you have July, there's 4th of July, so you can't, diet then. I don't think there's anything going on in August, but why take a chance? I used to go to the gym a lot. Don't let this relapse look fool you. And sometimes it's uncomfortable with the gym because when I would go, I was always worried that I stood out. I worried that people that were at the gym, people who were in good shape, people who were working out, they would look at me and I always kind of felt self-conscious about that. But the thing about people at the gym is that they're really supportive and they're really nice people. I'll give you an example. One time I was there and I was trying to lift myself up, and one of the guys walked by and he was like, "That's not how you tie a noose." I reject your moans. Somebody came up here and said they had all the AIDS of Freddie Mercury. So I reject any moaning from here on out. I grew up out in Santa Clarita, and I'm Jewish, and there's not a lot. If you're not familiar with Santa Clarita, there's not a lot of Jewish people that live out there. So growing up, I had a lot of non-Jewish friends, and they used to ask me. They were like, "Brian, what does it mean to be Jewish in comparison to Christianity and Catholicism?" And I told them, I said, "Well, in Judaism, there's just God. You just worship God, and that's it. And then in Christianity, there's the Trinity. There's God, the Holy Spirit, and Jesus Christ. And then in Catholicism, there's God and the Super Friends. There's Mary, Joseph, Batman and Robin. I think Jesus is in there somewhere. And they, ride around Gotham City saving them from the devil. But it's funny that they would ask me because, I really, as a Jewish person, I don't really know that. I'm not a religious Jewish person, so I didn't really know a lot of things about being Jewish. Somebody asked me one time, they're like, "Well, what is the origin of circumcision?" And I didn't know, so I had to go look it up, which gave me a very colorful internet history. But I had found out that what had happened is that God had said to Abraham that if the Jews wanted Israel, that they would have to become circumcised and all of their descendants would have to become circumcised. And that makes me think that God didn't want them to have it. And that he was trying to come up with the craziest shit. And be like, there's no way they would do this. Because he wanted the Palestinians to have it. So, what crazy shit could I ask them to do? And it sucks for Abraham because, have you ever had to give delicate news to a bunch of people? I'm sure he went back to God at least 2 or 3 times, back to that mountain, you said what you said, right? I'm just checking in, I'm sure when he told him, he had to have told them, and somebody was like, "This place isn't that nice." That was when the first atheist was ever created. Right then. I also, in my research, discovered that other tribes, other non-Jewish cultures and religions, they would circumcise their children as well. But the reason that they did it was because they wanted to separate themselves from their non-circumcised neighbors, which is very weird. You guys ever hear of name tags? This was obviously invented way before name tags. And pants, apparently. But the other thing that's always funny to me about knowing things about Jewish people is because, if you look at, the New Testament in particular, is that because the people that are in the New Testament are Jewish people. The characters, the people that are in the Bible, I'm not saying that to be like shady, I'm just saying like the characters that are in the Bible, I don't know what, the people who were really alive, for those of you who didn't know, the characters, that are in the Bible are Jewish people, and sometimes the Bible's written in a way where they really don't represent Jewish people appropriately. Like, I'll give you an example. Like the story of Christmas, right? Mary and Joseph go to this inn, and the innkeeper there tells them that there's no room, and they just leave quietly. I don't know how many Jewish people you all know, but I know quite a bit. And I know that's not how it happened. Not even a name drop. It's kind of a Jewish thing, right? Like, do you know whose baby this is? It's not his. My dad said something kind of messed up to me recently. He's here tonight, but fuck him, let's talk about him. My dad does a little bit of stand-up as well, and we were seeing a show, or he was in a show and I was seeing him, and him and I were in the back talking to another comedian, and this comedian said to us, they said, oh, you guys should maybe think about doing like a father and son act. That would be really fun. And my dad says to this comedian, he's like, well, I've always thought of that, but I don't think it would work because I don't really look my age. Now, two things, guys. I never thought anybody would ever say that they look too good to work with me. I also never thought that person would be my father.
But it's true.
It is true. Anytime now, security, anytime. I also have a new job. New jobs are always cool. I work at a board game store, which is a big improvement over my last job. I worked at a gun range. I worked in the bar. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why? Like, you heard what I said, like gun range as in like pull, bang, and like bar, like glug, glug, glug. I hope that guy doesn't have a gun. And what was funny about it was that so our policy was that if you're at the bar and someone comes up to you, you have to ask them if they're done shooting for the day before you give them alcohol, which is a great policy because no one ever lies. And these people, they would come up and they would say they would say the same thing. They would be like, well, can I just have one beer before I go shoot because I get nervous. And I'm like, you're nervous? Like, you're shooting at targets, not at bears. What's there to be nervous about? You have a gun. I don't know how many of you have ever handled a gun before, but there's no reason to be nervous when you're holding a gun. Like, I'm not endorsing gun violence, but think about this. The next time you're doing something that makes you nervous, bring a gun with you. Just bring one. Just going to the doctor and worried about the news, bring a gun. See how you feel. Talking to a significant other, like, oh no, we might bring a gun. People ask me all the time, like, Brian, you do comedy, you must be so nervous. How do you handle it? Gun. Now I work in a board game store, and it's funny seeing board games that come out, because I have my own ideas for board games. Like, the first one is a game called Modernopoly, and the way it works is you roll the dice, and you move around the board, and you never get any opportunities to ever buy the properties, and then you die. And that's it. That's the whole game. The other game, you guys are not going to like as much. The other game is you play as a Nazi in World War II building death camps, and it's called Minecraft. Surprisingly, the shirts aren't selling that well. I like using social media. My favorite thing about social media are the news articles that they put up. One of my favorite ones recently was about how scientists were finding that men who had beards had fecal matter in their beards. Unfortunately, my girlfriend read this article, so now whenever she sits on my face, she puts a toilet seat cover down first. My girlfriend and I, we met through online dating. I think online dating is really great, and all the websites are great, except for farmersonly.com. They do have a catchy lingo, though, is you don't have to be lonely with farmersonly.com. But I came up with my own slogan, tell me what you think. Farmersonly.com. Are you tired of the dirt being the only thing that you're plowing? Sign up today. And why is it that farming is the only profession that gets its own dating website? Like, why is there no, like, dentistmeet.com? Like, I have a cavity that needs to be filled real bad, and I need a professional. Or like plentyofrealtors.com. Like, well, it's a fixer-upper. And if it doesn't work out, you can always flip it. Or oklawyers.com. Are you tired of only arguing at work? My girlfriend and I, we like going to the movies a lot. We're really into horror movies. One of my favorite horror movies is the movie Poltergeist. But it has a confusing premise. The premise of the movie is that this family lives in a house that's haunted because it's built on an Indian burial ground, which doesn't make any sense to me because none of the ghosts are Indian. If I were to buy a house that were haunted, I would want one that's on a Mexican burial ground, so that way the lawn would take care of itself. But they did a remake of the Poltergeist movie, and I always worry when they do remakes of horror movies because they tend to modernize them, and then it kind of hurts the movie in translation. Like, they're talking about doing a remake of The Exorcist, and I really hope that they don't make it modern. Like, could you imagine that little girl with a cell phone? Like, taking it out and putting it in front of her and taking a selfie of the back of her head? Her mom would be on WebMD all the time. And you know when it's WebMD, it's always the worst possible thing. It's like, well, her symptoms include she's levitating off of her bed and masturbating with a crucifix, so it's probably cancer. Her friends would be getting notifications on Facebook like, it says Reagan McNeil changed her status to your mother sucks cocks in hell. Feeling blessed. Eggplant fire. But my least favorite horror movie franchise has to be the Paranormal Activity movies. It's basically about people who are afraid of shit falling down in their house in the middle of the night. If you haven't seen Paranormal Activities 1 through 6, I will demonstrate all of them here for you tonight. And that's it. They made 6 of these. And people like to argue with me. They're like, oh, something that runs around your house in the middle of the night and knocks shit over? That's terrifying. I'm like, really? You ever lived with a cat before? Thank you guys.